Today's discussion explores a series of cases featuring eerie and unsettling photographs, each amplified by the dark histories they conceal. What makes these images even more disturbing is the sinister stories behind them. The first involves a hostage crisis that erupted in West Germany during the late 1970s. A situation so grim it could easily be mistaken for a scene from a dystopian series. The tension and desperation in that incident left a haunting visual imprint, echoing the darkness of the events. The second case centers on a remote island in the English Channel, where for nearly 14 years, residents endured terror at the hands of a serial criminal dubbed the Beast of Jersey. His reign of terror cast a long shadow over the community, with photographs from that period capturing both the island's haunting landscape and the fear etched on its inhabitants' faces. Finally, we examine a crime that shook Texas and reverberated across the globe, a shocking event that left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness. Each of these stories is intertwined with disturbing imagery that, when paired with their dark histories, creates a chilling tableau. Before diving into these stories, I want to share a message about our sponsor, NordVPN. I've relied on NordVPN for several years, appreciating two key features. First, it provides robust security, shielding my online activity with advanced encryption that ensures my data remains protected. Their strict no-logs policy guarantees that my private information is neither tracked nor shared. Second, NordVPN unlocks a vast world of entertainment. Living in Canada, I can access streaming content from the United States, Europe, and beyond. With over 5,400 servers across 59 countries, I can enjoy movies and shows from all over the globe. For example, checking Canadian Netflix allows me to watch popular titles that were removed from American Netflix last year. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee each month, you can start safeguarding your online presence with NordVPN. Simply visit their website to learn more. In August of 1988, the town of Gladbach, located in West Germany, became the scene of a dramatic hostage crisis. Early that morning, 32-year-old Dieter Dykovsky and 31-year-old Hans-Jürgen Rosna stormed into a local bank, quickly taking control. Fortunately, the bank was empty at the time, with no customers present. However, police swiftly surrounded the building, leading to a tense standoff. Negotiations ensued, and by the end of the day, authorities agreed to let the two men leave with approximately $227,000 in Deutsche Marks and a getaway vehicle. That evening, Dykovsky and Rosna exited the bank, taking two hostages with them and fleeing the scene. Their escape route led them to pick up Marianne Lubisch, a 34-year-old woman and the girlfriend of one of the gunmen. The trio then traveled about 140 miles to the city of Freeman. There, they attempted to rent a car but failed, prompting them to head to a bus station. They boarded a bus carrying 30 passengers, taking everyone on board hostage. The media quickly arrived, with journalists boarding the bus to photograph and record the unfolding events, even interviewing the armed captors and some hostages. Rosna, still armed, disembarked briefly to hold an impromptu press conference on the street. He declared his readiness to end his life, even placing his gun in his mouth, but he ultimately did not shoot himself. Soon after, Dykovsky and Rosna forced the bus driver to leave the station, setting course for Hamburg, which was about 75 miles away. Along the way, they released 4 elderly passengers and a child on the highway. At a service station, they freed the 2 bank hostages and later Marianne Lubish, who went to the restroom. As she exited, police officers seized her. Realizing Lubish was missing, Dykovsky and Rosna issued a chilling ultimatum: release her or execute a hostage every 5 minutes. When police refused, Dykovsky shot 15-year-old Emmanuel Ali Togeorgi 3 times in the head. The young victim, who was on the bus with his sister, who witnessed the shooting, was rushed to the hospital but died shortly after arrival. Several witnesses believed Emmanuel had stepped in to protect his sister from the gunmen. Following the shooting, Lubish was released and returned to the bus. The police had attempted to free her earlier, but their efforts were hampered by broken handcuff keys. The bus then resumed its journey, with police cars in pursuit. During the chase, a police vehicle collided with a truck, resulting in the death of 1 officer and injuring another. The tense standoff continued into the early hours of August 18th. In the early hours, a bus was intercepted by Dutch police in the Netherlands, who surrounded the vehicle but refused to negotiate with the kidnappers, Dykovsky and Rosna. They insisted that negotiations would only proceed if children were aboard. By around 5 in the morning, 3 women and 2 children were released. Several hours later, German authorities provided Dykovsky, Rosna, and Lubish with a BMW, along with 2 hostages, 18-year-old Silke Bischoff and Ines Wattal. Bischoff was a trainee at a law firm, having just finished her workday and waiting for her bus with her friend Wattal. Dykovsky, Rosna, and Lubish took the front seats, while the hostages sat in the back. Initially, they appeared headed toward Amsterdam, but then they turned back and crossed into West Germany around 7 a.m. Nearly 48 hours had passed since Dykovsky and Rosna robbed a bank to sustain themselves. During this time, they drank beer, used amphetamines, and grew increasingly unstable. After returning to West Germany, they drove to Cologne and parked outside a shopping district, where a crowd of journalists and onlookers gathered. Some reporters interviewed Bischoff as she sat in the car. Unfortunately, some journalists behaved unethically. One noticed Dykovsky's gun on his lap and suggested that he threatened Bischoff with it to make their footage more dramatic. A Cologne-based journalist named Udo Rebel, who had been off work for 2 days, had only just learned about the hostage situation that morning through radio and television. He pushed through the crowd to approach the kidnappers and quickly established a rapport with them. It was evident that the stress, lack of sleep, drugs, and alcohol were taking a toll on their mental state. Rosna asked for directions to the Autobahn, but struggled to remember the route, so he asked Rebel to get into the car and guide him. Rebel agreed, entering the back seat next to Bischoff. The kidnappers then drove toward the Autobahn, heading toward Bonn. About 45 minutes later, they stopped at a service station, where Rebel exited the vehicle. The kidnappers, along with their 2 hostages, resumed their journey on the Autobahn. 2 hours later, police rammed their car, immobilizing it, which led to a fierce shootout. The confrontation ended with Rosna, Dykovsky, and Lubish being arrested. During the chaos, Ines Wattal was shot in the thigh but survived, having managed to escape into a ditch. Tragically, Bischoff was struck once in the heart and died from her wound. Reports differ on who fired the fatal shot, but police indicated it was either Rosna or Dykovsky. The entire ordeal lasted 54 hours, during which the trio traveled over 430 miles. 3 lives were lost. In March 1991, Dykovsky, Rosna, and Marian Lapusch were sentenced for their roles in the crime spree. Both Dykovsky and Rosna received life sentences, while Wattal was sentenced to 9 years. Wattal served 6 years before being released. Dykovsky was released in August after serving 30 years and was given a new identity, now living anonymously. If he is still alive, he is 65 years old. Rosna remains in prison, and his release date is unknown. He was 64 at the time of this account. The police and media faced heavy criticism for their handling of the crisis, with questions raised about their tactics and response. Separately, the island of Jersey, located in the English Channel near the northwest coast of France, covers about 45 square miles and is the largest of the Channel Islands. In the 1950s, Jersey was home to approximately 50,000 residents. A terrifying crime spree began there in November of 1957, marking a dark chapter in its history. A 29-year-old female nurse was waiting at a bus stop when she was suddenly attacked by a man wearing a face covering. He dragged her into a nearby field where he assaulted and raped her. She managed to survive and later received medical treatment, including several stitches. Several months later, in March of 1958, a 20-year-old woman walking home after disembarking from a bus was approached by a man who put a noose around her neck. He dragged her into a field and raped her before releasing her, prompting her to report the assault to the police. Between July of 1958 and October of 1959, a series of similar attacks occurred, each bearing striking resemblance. In the October 1959 incident, however, the victim, a woman aged 31, fought off her attacker, who was described as having a slight build, standing about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a mustache, and possibly in his early to mid-40s. Witnesses noted he had an Irish accent and an unusual musty scent, which many found distinctive. These repeated failures seemed to embolden the perpetrator, leading him to escalate his crimes with greater audacity. On Valentine's Day in 1960, he broke into a home and placed a noose around a 12-year-old boy's neck, then led him outside to assault him sexually. In March of that year, a 25-year-old woman walking to a bus stop was approached by a man claiming to be a doctor. She accepted a ride, but he drove her to a field where he beat her and then sexually assaulted her. She managed to escape during the assault, screaming for help as the attacker sped away. Later that same month, one of his most notorious crimes took place. A woman aged 43 and her 15-year-old daughter lived in an isolated house. The attacker cut their phone line and broke into their home. When the woman investigated a noise downstairs, he grabbed her and demanded money. The commotion drew the teenage girl out of bed, distracting the attacker, allowing the woman to flee. She sought help at a nearby farm, but no one was home. Returning to her house, she discovered her daughter had been attacked. A noose was found around her neck, and she had been led into a field and raped. All victims consistently described the attacker as a man with an Irish accent, a musty smell, and a slight build. The mounting fear among Jersey residents led to demands for action. Soon, a suspect emerged, a 55-year-old eccentric named Alphonse Lagaster-Wall. He lived alone in a dilapidated cottage and was often seen wandering the island alone. When questioned about his walks, he claimed he simply enjoyed nature. Despite police interrogation, Wall denied any involvement in the assaults, leaving authorities to continue their investigation. In April of 1960, authorities found no evidence linking him to the string of crimes so he was not detained. In the early hours of April, a 14-year-old girl was sleeping in her room when she awoke to find a masked man inside. Her scream caused the intruder to flee, leaving her unharmed. A few months later, on July 30th, an 8-year-old boy was abducted from his home. The kidnapper was identified by a distinctive raincoat he wore. The boy was sexually assaulted during the attack, which marked a disturbing escalation. After this incident, it's believed the attacker ceased his assaults for the remainder of 1960. However, on February 18, 1961, a 12-year-old boy was taken from his residence. He was led away with a noose but was not sexually assaulted and was eventually returned home. Just weeks later, on March 4th, an 11-year-old boy was awakened by a man strangling him with a belt. The boy's screams caused the attacker to flee, ending that encounter. In April of 1961, an 11-year-old girl was kidnapped from her bed and raped in a nearby field. By this point, the perpetrator had earned a chilling nickname, the Beast of Jersey. Many believed that Alphonse Lagasteau was responsible, but despite numerous searches, over a dozen, police found no evidence linking him. Lagasteau faced harassment from locals and vandalism that ransacked his home, yet he maintained his innocence. In May 1961, he exiled himself to a small island called La Créole, about 6 miles northeast of Jersey. He reasoned that if the attacks persisted during his absence, it would prove he was not the beast. Around the same time, the authorities enlisted the help of the Scaling Guard team, but their efforts did not lead to any arrests. For a year, the attacks ceased, only to resume on April 19, 1962, when a 9-year-old boy was abducted from his bed. He was raped in a field but allowed to return home. The boy described his attacker as wearing a long overcoat and having a musty smell. Once again, the Beast of Jersey went silent. It is believed he struck again in April of 1963, kidnapping and sexually assaulting another 9-year-old boy. Several months later, in November, an 11-year-old boy was attacked. In July of 1964, a 10-year-old girl was sexually assaulted, followed by a 16-year-old boy a month later, who described his attacker as wearing a long overcoat, a horrifying mask, and a wig of black hair. Scotland Yard began collecting fingerprints from over 20,000 residents, yet no match was found, and no arrests were made. The attacks paused for 2 years until August of 1966, when a 15-year-old boy was raped by a masked man. After this, the Beast of Jersey disappeared once more, only to reappear in August of 1970, when a 13-year-old boy was kidnapped by a man in a mask, wig, and long coat. Like many previous victims, he was taken to a field and sexually assaulted. Following this incident, there was a lengthy period of silence. The pattern resumed on July 10, 1971, when a police officer attempted to stop a car that had run a red light, but the narrative cuts off there. On a red light, the driver ignored the signal and led police on a high-speed pursuit. Eventually, he turned onto a dead-end street, stopped his vehicle, and fled on foot. The officer gave chase and managed to tackle him. The suspect was identified as 46-year-old Edward Payne. During the arrest, officers noticed he wore wristbands with protruding nails and a long overcoat with nails embedded in its pockets. A search of his car revealed suspicious items, including a belt with a knife sheath, a flashlight, and several lengths of cord. Most incriminating were a mask and a black-haired wig, suggesting possible concealment or intimidation. Edward Payne was taken to the police station for questioning. He was a respected figure on the island, working in construction, with his wife Joan managing an orphanage. The couple had 3 biological children and fostered many others. Known affectionately as Uncle Ted, Edward was famous for dressing as Santa Claus each Christmas, distributing toys and candy to children. When questioned about his red light violation, he claimed he was en route to an orgy. As interrogation continued, he eventually confessed to being the so-called Beast of Jersey. A search of his home uncovered a hidden room behind a cupboard in his home office. The investigators noted its musty smell and found an altar with a dagger pointing downward into a glass bowl, a chalice filled with clothes, several books on witchcraft and black magic, and a volume about Jill Dury. The latter was a knight who fought alongside Joan of Arc in the 15th century. The room also contained disturbing artifacts hinting at dark rituals. Many photographs were taken of Edward's mask, wig, and coat, sometimes modeled by officers, other times displayed on mannequins. The purpose of the mask remained unclear. Some believed he wore it to hide his identity, while others thought it was part of his black magic beliefs or an effort to terrify his victims. Edward Payne faced trial in November of 1971. Although it was suspected that he had committed dozens of kidnappings and rapes, he faced only 13 charges stemming from 6 separate assaults. During the trial, it was revealed that Edward believed himself to be a descendant of Jill Dury. The proceedings lasted 5 days, with the jury deliberating for just 45 minutes before returning a verdict. Edward Payne was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His wife, Joan, insisted she had never known about his crimes. They had been living separately for years. She in the master bedroom, he in his home office, which contained a hidden entrance to a secret room. In 1972, Joan published a book titled The Beast of Jersey about Edward. While incarcerated, Edward divorced her and later entered into a relationship with a woman, marrying her in 1989, still behind bars. He served his entire 30-year sentence and was released in 1991, returning to Jersey. However, many residents were deeply disturbed by his return to the island that he had terrorized for over 14 years. Consequently, he and his new wife moved to the Isle of Wight. Edward Payne died in 1994, in his late 60s, just 3 years after his release. The first notable incident is the Luby's Cafeteria Massacre. This image might resemble a typical car accident. Such incidents occasionally occur when a driver mistakenly presses the gas pedal instead of the brake, resulting in a vehicle crashing into a storefront. Yet, the story behind this particular photo is far more tragic. George Renard, born in Pennsylvania in October 1956, was involved in a devastating event that went beyond a mere accident. George Bernard was born to an army surgeon father and a homemaker mother, growing up amid a turbulent family environment. His father was known for his authoritarian and often tyrannical demeanor, while his mother, an attractive woman, dressed in a youthful style that belied her age. Initially, Bernard yearned for his mother's attention, but as he matured, his feelings shifted. Frequent arguments between his parents, sometimes escalating into physical violence, marked his childhood. Before finishing high school, his family relocated around a dozen times, leaving him without close friends and with mediocre academic performance. His favorite pastimes included smoking marijuana, listening to rock music, and playing drums in various bands, though he rarely stayed long in any group. After graduating from high school in La Cruz, New Mexico in 1974, Bernard enlisted in the Navy, serving 2 years before receiving an honorable discharge. He then joined the Merchant Marines, a period during which his colleagues noticed a frighteningly hostile side of him. Known for persistent anger and extreme misogyny, Bernard's behavior grew darker over time. After 15 years in the Merchant Marines, he was dismissed in 1989 when authorities discovered a small amount of marijuana in his cabin. This marked a particularly bleak chapter in his life, as he struggled to find stable employment afterward, taking on menial jobs but rarely staying long. Bernard was largely solitary, avoiding romantic relationships and preferring sex with sex workers, a fact that underscored his deep-seated hatred of women, especially his mother, whom he often called a viper. In June of 1991, Bernard visited the FBI, claiming that a conspiracy of women was sabotaging his life. He insisted they were spying on him, listening to his phone calls and talking to potential employers to prevent him from finding work. Shortly thereafter, he moved into his mother's mansion in Belton, Texas, to act as her caretaker, though she was not living there and planned to sell the property. During this period, Bernard became fixated on documentaries about mass murders, particularly the 1984 San Isidro McDonald's massacre, where James Huberty shot and killed 21 people and wounded 19 others before being killed by police. Bernard even visited the site of this tragedy. He also developed an obsession with the song "Don't Take Me Alive" by Steely Dan, which narrates a story of a hostage-taking killer surrounded by police but refusing to surrender. He listened to this song repeatedly, immersing himself in its dark narrative. On October 15, 1991, Bernard celebrated his 35th birthday alone, drinking most of the day. The following morning, he went to a nearby convenience store for breakfast, a routine he maintained frequently, though the clerk noticed nothing unusual. On a day marked by routine, Bernard, feeling unusually optimistic, returned home and noted on his calendar that his life had become a dead end, filled with despair and hopelessness. That morning, at 11:50, he left his mother's house in Belton, Texas, driving his pickup truck armed with 2 semi-automatic handguns and over 100 rounds of legally purchased ammunition. His destination was a nearby town, Killeen, where he headed to Luby's Cafeteria, a popular chain of restaurant-style eateries primarily found in Texas. October 16, 1993, was also Boss's Day, making the restaurant busier than usual, with approximately 150 patrons enjoying lunch. At 12:39, Bernard drove his truck straight through the front window of the cafeteria, shattering the glass and beginning his attack. From inside his vehicle, he opened fire, then stepped out and shouted something along the lines of, "This is what Belton did to me. Is it worth it? This is payback day." His rampage targeted both employees and customers, with a particular focus on women, though men were also shot. Notably, Bernard refrained from harming children, even declaring, "I'm not killing any babies today." Many victims were shot in the head to ensure their death. Police were alerted immediately, and within minutes, officers arrived on the scene. A fierce exchange of gunfire erupted between Bernard and the police. During the shootout, he was wounded in his right forearm, the bullet passing through and lodging in his chest, and was also shot in his thigh. Despite his injuries, Bernard managed to retreat to a restroom, where he ultimately ended his own life by shooting himself in the right temple. He died on the bathroom floor, bringing his 12-minute assault to an end. In total, 22 people lost their lives, 8 men and 14 women, while another woman succumbed to her injuries later in the hospital. The victims ranged in age from 29 to 75 years old, leaving a tragic mark on that day of violence. In April of 2007, a tragic event unfolded that etched itself into American history. A lone gunman, Bernard, set a grim record by committing the deadliest mass shooting by a single individual at that time, resulting in 23 fatalities and leaving more than 20 others injured. His heinous act would stand as the worst in the nation for 16 years until the Virginia Tech massacre shattered that grim milestone. Despite extensive speculation, no one truly understood what motivated George Nerd to carry out such violence, nor why he chose the Luby's cafeteria in Killeen as his target. In the aftermath of mass shootings, society often calls for stricter gun control laws, aiming to prevent future tragedies. However, the Luby's massacre was somewhat different. The perpetrator, a 38-year-old woman named Susanna Hubb, was dining with her parents, 71-year-old Al and 67-year-old Ursula Gracia Hubb, when the attack occurred. Both her parents lost their lives that day, while Susanna herself survived. She had a firearm but kept it in her vehicle because carrying weapons into the restaurant was prohibited by law. Following the shooting, Hubb became a vocal supporter of the right to carry concealed weapons. Thanks in part to her advocacy, in 1996, Texas made it legal to carry concealed firearms in certain areas. That same year, Hubb ran as a Republican candidate for state representative, winning the election. She served 5 terms before retiring in 2007. The Luby's cafeteria reopened 5 months after the tragedy, but eventually closed in September of 2000 due to business reasons. Today, the building houses a Chinese buffet restaurant. Thank you for engaging with today's story. For more insights, consider exploring the special offer from NordVPN to enhance your online security. Also, check out the latest episode of our podcast, Into the Killing, where we delve into one of the most perplexing cases involving children featured on milk cartons, an intriguing story filled with unexpected twists. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. That's all for today. Thank you again for listening.